Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Dallas Live, and I am your host, Dr. RC. And the number to call is 469 307 1642 1642. Today we have featured guest Nancy Hartwell, whose business is uncovering human trafficking. Nancy, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, Nancy, before we get to right to it, I want to ask you something about yourself so that the audience know where do you live, where you were born, and what did you do early part of your life, what are you doing now, and what's in the future for you.
Okay, well, I was born in Charleston, West Virginia. I grew up in Tampa, Florida. I studied international relations at American University in Washington, D.C., whereupon I met and married a distinguished attorney from Cameroon. And so I lived in Cameroon for 14 years.
Well,
Most of
for
the
our
first,
audience, Cameroon, exactly where is Cameroon?
it's in Central Africa.
Central
A
Africa, correct.
beautiful Yes, beautiful, beautiful country, by the way, and I absolutely loved it there. Um, I now live in Silver Spring, Maryland, right outside Washington,
Okay.
and I have devoted most of my career to international development and international trade. And the reason I got interested in the topic of human trafficking is that some years ago, a friend of mine disappeared, a tall, beautiful blonde. And it later became known that she had been sold into the harem of a sultan. And that spooked me really bad, and I started collecting stories, and over the years I've collected hundreds of stories. They're anecdotes, but they form definite patterns, and so I've spent about 40 years studying the topic of human trafficking.
Okay, now let's get to this particular scenario. This German friend of yours disappeared and she was sold to a harem of a sultan. Now,
Yes,
how old was this German friend? I assume she is a female.
yes, she was 22,
22, very young. Uh,
very young.
Describe her a little bit more.
Well, her name was Ursula,
Okay.
and she's from Nuremberg, and she was a German volunteer in Cameroon. They found her bicycle next to the road, and she absolutely just disappeared, and that's the last anybody heard from her.
Now she is disappeared completely, and they never found a body. Now, is there nobody ever heard of her, and nothing ever
Nope,
came out of it?
nope, nope. Nobody ever saw her again or heard from her. There was nobody, and the rumors were circulated that she had been sold to a sultan, and that seemed to explain an awful lot. So we figured that it was probably true.
Okay, so it is likely she might have been sold, but there is no definite proof yet. But it looks like,
There's,
based upon your life experience dealing with this human trafficking, you firmly believe that she most likely should have been sold to a harem of a sultan.
yes,
Oh,
I do because I've heard so many similar stories since that they start making a lot of sense.
now you have written three books. Now, before we go into the details of these three books, why did you write these books?
Why did I write them?
Yes.
Because people don't understand the scope of this problem, and if they were more aware of it, then they'd want to do something. This this is a very underreported and underappreciated um,
Topic.
topic. Yes, people just don't know about it, and it's also a very difficult topic for people to hear about. They don't want to think that slavery still exists or that human trafficking exists in the year 2013. And so there's a lot of resistance to people even opening their minds and their ears to know what's going on. So I wrote these books to try to put in a very reader friendly way to describe the lives of these girls after they have been trafficked. They're not pretty stories, but it's fascinating reading. And um, I'm just trying to bring to life what lives of suffering and misery these girls go through. So that's why I wrote the books, just to help people understand what's really going on.
I totally understand. Before we go into the details of those books, in the 21st century, they never thought there is going to be pirates in the high seas. Now we know there are Somali pirates out there and alive and well.
And
They also think
Nigerian
that the.
pirates too.
I'm sorry.
Nigerian pirates too. The guys who just kidnapped two Americans.
I did not know this. So there are Nigerians joining the
Yes,
force. It looks like it.
just a couple days ago. Yes.
My goodness. So naturally, in the 21st century, it was thought there is no slavery. Slavery has been abolished since Emancipation Declaration. Apparently, that's not the case.
Yeah. It's been abolished. Yes, doctor. It's been abolished almost everywhere. But
Yes.
there are more slaves on Earth right now than at any time in human history.
How many
Experts
slaves are
estimate.
out there, in your opinion?
Well, experts estimate between 28 and 30 million. That is the entire population of the Republic of Malaysia, or perhaps more to the point, the population of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, where a lot of them go.
Wow. Well, I hope the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia doesn't have all 30 million people. I mean, then it'll double their population.
Yes, now King Faisal outlawed by royal decree slavery in 1962. However, the Sharia or Islamic law permits slavery, and that's the constitution of Saudi Arabia. So it basically just went underground.
Okay, now you see, I was under the impression the Sharia law allows slavery without any. You don't have to apologize for it if you are a follower of Muslim faith, and it clearly says in Quran that slavery is fine and dandy. There's nothing wrong with it, So
Well, yes, and
naturally, the high concentration of slaves you would probably find in the Middle East, where the Islamic rulers are out there, like what you just talked about early on, in say Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, United Arab Emirates, Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Oman,
uh-huh,
Qatar, and all these places. Now,
right, the Emirates, yes.
the Emirates. Now, coming back to this, this is a very, it's pretty outrageous story. If that is the case, it's a very sad, heartbreaking, tragic, and incredibly moving. The stories of trafficking women. But let me ask you this: is this specific to Middle East, or is it prevalent throughout the world?
Well, it's a problem all over the world. In fact, there are probably a couple 100,000 slaves right here in the U.S., mostly
You
working
must be kidding me.
in no sir, in the agriculture industry, in it's like massage parlors. There there are about 200,000. It is a huge problem in Southeast Asia and South Asia. It is a growing problem in Eastern Europe. It's getting to be a national issue in China. It's a worldwide phenomenon, and the difference. Okay, I'm specialized in the modern day slave trade, where girls are actually kidnapped from Norway or Dallas or Kentucky and shipped to stock harems and brothels on the Persian Gulf. But and that's the modern day slave trade. There's just no other way to describe it. Now, in most of the other countries, it is like pie on pie or Vietnamese on Vietnamese. It's domestic. Um, but in the Persian Gulf, it is the modern day slave trade where people are shipped across national borders um, as as slaves.
So, what would be your rough estimate of number of? Let's get to the right the specific group of slaves, young
Hmm.
girls or teenagers between the age of perhaps 12 to 22 or 30. Of course, at 30 in the slave trade, they're probably too old, isn't it? So, what would be the
Yes,
number of slaves in the? in the Middle East?
It's hard to put your finger on it, but hundreds and hundreds of girls are shipped there every year, and I'm beginning to suspect thousands. And the problem is getting worse because as these countries accumulate more and more oil wealth, they have to figure out what to spend money on. So they think recreational terms of well-stocked harems and brothels stocked with tall blondes.
My goodness. So, so let's say, you also talked about slavery in Southeast Asia. I would imagine that includes India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Nepal, Thailand,
Yes,
Cambodia,
yes,
Laos, Vietnam, China.
yes, yes.
All right,
Um,
you didn't want to say what these countries are. I said, well, it's my
and
duty to tell
and
this specifically, tell them who they are. Okay, good.
and also let's also include the Philippines. They say that more than half of the tourists who go to Thailand and the Philippines are there for either pedophilia or kinky sex.
Well, that is a well-known fact. As a matter of fact, I heard about this. Now, what about little boys?
Ye-
What is the scenario there?
yes, there is some traffic in little boys for pedophiles, and then when the boys grow up, they are either castrated and become eunuchs to guard the girls in harems, or some of them go into homosexual brothels.
Oh my
They don't have
goodness.
any fun either. But overwhelmingly, it's girls between the age of 10 and 18,
Oh, okay. So very young
and
girls.
very young girls. And
It's a
maybe you
heartbreaking.
maybe you heard. Well, a 10-year-old isn't considered a child in the Middle East. Maybe you heard a couple of weeks ago a case in Yemen. There was an 8-year-old girl who was married, and her 40-year-old husband attempted to have sex with her on their wedding night,
And
and
she
in the
was 8 years
process,
old.
she was 8 years old, still playing with Barbie.
Now, which
Um,
country is this?
Yemen,
Yemen. Okay.
right on the Arabian Peninsula,
I know
and
exactly where Yemen is. Our friend,
yeah,
our worst possible enemy, Osama bin Laden, was born in Yemen.
right, right. Well, this shows you the condition of females in that part of the world. He injured her so severely that she died.
Oh my goodness.
But a lot of girls are married by the age of 10, so they don't consider sex with an 8 or 9 year old as pedophilia there.
Yes, absolutely true. I was watching a congregation where the pontification was done by the Grand Mufti of Egypt. Okay,
Yes,
and he was telling that it depends upon what age one should consider a girl eligible for getting married, and what age she is allowed to have intercourse. Now,
right.
how are they basing this? They are basing this on the basis of the prevailing customs in a specific country, and also what Muhammad did, which is all written down in Quran. Muhammad, his last wife, he found her when she was 6 years old, and
Yes,
he had a sexual intercourse with her when she is 9 years
nine.
old. Correct?
Yes,
And
Khadija,
and
Khadija. Yes,
Aisha, right? Aisha, you got it right. Very good. So,
Khadija. Yes, yes,
and when Muhammad was, I think he was 57 or 58 years old at the time. So you
yes.
can imagine, see, when the countries in the Middle East, like Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, etc., etc., when they think that this is not a problem, this is it's not. There is one other problem that you have to remember. They have some friends in the American Psychiatric Association. Do you know that?
No, I wasn't aware of that.
But I think on August 14th there was a conference in your town, in Maryland, near
Uh
Maryland,
huh.
in and you know what? Before I tell this story, I think we need to keep our audience in suspense. How come the Islamic Society of America and the guys who are going to write the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of the American Psychiatric Association, how they combine together? So that is something that we have to think about. Nancy, before we close down on this first program, I would like to tell my audience the number to call is 469 307 1642. And ladies and gentlemen, we will be right back in about 2 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Dallas Live, and I am your host, Dr. RC, and the number to call is 469 307 1642. We are listening to Nancy Hartwell, who has spent most of her life uncovering human trafficking. Nancy, welcome back to our second segment.
Thank you, Doctor.
All right, listen, before we went into our break, I wanted to tell you about this little news. There was
Yes.
there was a conference of the American Psychiatrists Association, and the very renowned psychiatrists from Harvard, Johns Hopkins, and Louisville University came, and then they said that pedophilia is no longer a crime, and all the pedophiles in the American prisons must be released. And this is the most interesting part. They're saying that the pedophilia is not a crime, and the person who are pedophiles, their name has to be changed to minor attracted person. This is the goal. Now, what do you think of this?
Oh, yes, I did hear about that. That the pedophiles have requested the same legal protections as gays because they say, "Hey, this is just how we're wired. It's not our fault, and it's not a crime."
Well,
Um,
the next one that is going to come down the pike is very simple. The serial killers are going to say, "Hey, this is how we are wired. He can't help it. We got to keep murdering these people. So give us a special status."
right. Well, the problem I have with this is a 5-year-old child is not capable of giving legal consent.
That's right.
And the 5-year-old child is going to be traumatized, and whether the pedophiles are wired that way or not, and granted they may very well will be, it's causing a child to suffer, and I'm sorry, I cannot, and a child cannot give legal consent. So I think there are quite a few problems with this idea.
Absolutely. But I cannot believe that how anybody would. I don't know. I mean, the common sense has disappeared. It looks like in this particular matter. Coming
Yes,
back, yeah,
and political correctness has gone way too far.
yeah, I couldn't care less. Political correctness. Come on. I mean, what your heart tells you. Can you go ahead and violate a 5, 10, 7, 15-year-old child? I mean, it makes no sense.
No.
What? I mean, everybody, I'm wired to become, get a Nobel Prize, so. And you are somebody else say, well, I am wired to kill you, so what do you do? I mean, they're all same. No, it's not.
Right, right. And the mentally ill who commit crimes, I mean, this muddies the water considerably. But um, I'm sorry. I think pedophilia should
Now,
remain
you
a crime.
see, here is the problem. Some of the religious books are allowing this in some countries, like the Middle East. Now we
Yes,
have their supporters right down here in Washington, American Psychiatrists Association. They are saying that, hey, that's right. These people can't help it, so save them from the jail and imprisonment. And there's a whole bunch of other group of people are going to go ahead and start something else. Hey, we are like the gays and minorities, so we need more rights. And I don't know where that is going to end. Coming back to your scenario here, let's get to some of the questions. So you said that the primary targets that the traffickers go after are girls between the age of 10 and 18. Tell us
yes,
more
sir.
about it.
Overwhelmingly, and in fact, up to about age 14 are the primary targets because they're young, they're naive, they're easy to manipulate, and far easier to control. By the time a girl is 18, she's probably had been around the block a couple times and is a little bit more suspicious. Runaways are at especially high risk of being trafficked.
All right, now
They
let's get back to this runaway situation.
okay.
Um,
Uh huh.
Runaways, basically, you are mostly talking about girls, overwhelming majority, and also boys, right?
Yes, especially girls. Most of them have been abused at home, either physically or mentally or both, and they all they know is they can't possibly stay at home one more minute. But they don't know where to go. They don't know what to do. They don't have money. They don't have resources. And traffickers can spot them at 50 paces. They know exactly where to look for these girls and will find them in a matter of hours as a rule, or sometimes takes a couple days. But they will find them, and there's about a 90% chance that these poor girls will either be forced to work in a brothel or locked up in a harem or walk the streets. So the hell that they were living through at home has been exchanged for a hell that's 10 times worse. If any of your listeners know anybody who's planning to run away from home, please help them find some other solution.
Absolutely, yes. Take them to somewhere else. Take it to the local church and get some kind of a protection for them. Um,
Yes, they need somewhere safe to stay. They need counseling. They need support. They need hugs. They probably need a good hot meal.
yes.
Uh, but most especially, they need somewhere safe to stay.
All right.
Now
Now
there
see
are
this.
shelters
Yeah.
like Salvation Army might be able to help. There are other, like you said, church organizations that might be able to help. Every locality has different resources, um, but please help them, boys and girls, find some other solution besides running away because they're going to run right into the arms of these horrible monsters called traffickers.
All right. Then, if there is somebody who's going to planning to run away, what are the
Mhm.
places or areas or locations they should not be hanging around?
Right. Well, like parks, like
Parks.
under bridges, like bus stations, train stations. There are traffickers just looking looking for these victims.
Because these victims, they won't have probably much money, so the only way they can run
They
away
don't
is
have
to
much
take a
money. Right.
train or bus.
Right. They usually think of a relative at some other state where they might be able to stay, an aunt or an uncle or a big brother or sister or somebody, and they're just trying to get there, and these traffickers will even use very sneaky ways to strike up conversations. They'll pretend that they're going to help. um, oh, sweetie, you can't stay in the park tonight. This is dangerous. You know there are people looking for girls like you to do nasty things to. They'll play father, um, and they're very very susceptible. And when somebody offers some help, they're very likely to believe it.
Right. I can imagine. So these guys will come up with all kinds of ideas. You
Oh
said,
yes.
yeah, you said that the parents have done an excellent job of driving home the message. Can you go ahead and tell our audience what the parents should do to stop this?
Okay. Well, parents have done a really great job of telling their kids don't talk to strangers. Now, with little kids, what these traffickers will sometimes do is say, "Oh my goodness, my puppy went off into the woods there somewhere, and now I can't find him. Can you help me find my puppy?"
Ah,
Well, what kid isn't in love with a puppy, you know? And so they go into the woods. Well, of course, there's no puppy, and they become a statistic.
my goodness.
Um, Sometimes there's a tried and true technique of the flat tire in the parking lot. Now, well, it's the trafficker who flattened the tire, and then he gallantly offers to fix it. And of course, what parent has told the kids don't talk to heroes? Okay,
Uh huh.
um, when somebody helps you, you're polite. You thank them. But what they're trying to do is break through the stranger barrier.
Right.
Sometimes they will even work in teams. One guy will grope a girl, for instance,
Right.
and then another one who is his partner will come and hey, keep your hands here. And so the girl is very
Yes, Nancy, you are breaking off. Okay, go ahead.
yeah. Well, so and she's appreciative, and so she initiates a conversation because she's been trained by good parents to be polite, and when somebody helps you, you thank them. But
Right.
in the process, she has initiated a conversation with a stranger,
Now the stranger is no longer
and
a stranger.
he has broken
Yeah.
through the stranger barrier. He's a hero. He's not a stranger, you see.
Right.
so, so parents need to let their kids know about these techniques so that they can warn their friends also not to get caught up in this kind of trap.
Absolutely. My goodness, that's a confidence game by a con artist. So, what
Yeah,
what
well,
are
they
what are
know all
other
the techniques.
yeah, what are other techniques? Give us an example of a couple of more if you can.
Yes, okay. Well, social media has opened up a whole new area for traffickers to try to identify and lure and trap victims. Online propositions. Um, Parents, please, 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 you really need to monitor your kids' social media sites. Please. They won't appreciate it. They'll think you're trying to police them.
Right.
Actually, you're just trying to protect them. And a good tip is to look at your kids' social media sites along with them. That
Correct.
way, you're not doing it behind their back. You're not as likely to trip off World War III, and you can point out what their friends are posting. See, that's inappropriate dress, or this is risky behavior. You can point out the red flags and in the process educate them
Mm-hmm.
about what might be going on out there. Don't do it behind their back, do it with them so that they can see that you're doing it out of love and out of an effort to protect them and not to, quote, ruin their lives.
My goodness.
um,
You
now,
know, so one of the things that I was told to try, to prevent, not to do any crime, is to take them to the prison and tell them that this is how it looks like when you do crime. This is how you do the time. Similarly, maybe they can show them, man. If you don't listen to these cautious scenarios, you might end up in a scenario much worse than a local prison here.
oh, much worse,
Much
much
worse.
worse. Once a girl has been trafficked, her life expectancy goes to 5 years.
5 years?
5 years. So if she's trafficked at 13, the likelihood is that she will be dead by the time she's 18.
Because of the
And that,
abuse?
because of abuse, because of they're often forced to take drugs and can easily overdose, but mostly because of brutal pimps and brutal customers.
Right.
Um,
Oh my
another
God.
technique, another technique that traffickers often use, they will post ads on websites that teenage girls like to frequent, offering glamorous jobs as models, as um, a bit part in a movie, maybe to be featured in a hot new band, something that teenage girls dream of, right?
Right.
Music, movies, and modeling. Okay, they make it sound so glamorous that a 14-year-old is going to be salivating. Then they set up an office somewhere, make it look really convincing, with movie posters everywhere, and the girl shows up, and the guy's on a fake conversation, but she doesn't know that, with some agent in Hollywood who's trying to cast a remake of some major film. And man, if you're 14, this is mind blowing stuff. And then he'll ask the question. Now, what the girl hears is the first part of the question, but what he's really asking is the second part. And this is the question: do you have time for us to sit down and chat for a few minutes? Or is somebody waiting for you? Now, she hears, oh, he's taking me seriously. He wants to sit down and chat with me. What he's
Oh.
asking is, did you come alone and unprotected?
Oh. Yes.
Okay?
My
Okay?
goodness.
now, now if she says, oh, my dad had to go drop something off at his karate studio a couple blocks away. He'll be right back. The interview will be very short, and she will not get the job. But if she says, oh, no, that's okay, I have plenty of time, he'll sit down, chat with her for a few minutes, get her real excited, and then he says, well, let me show you into the studio. Well, the studio is a closet, and he dumps her in, locks the door, and he makes a phone call to a broker, and the next day she's in a crate on a cargo jet on her way to the Gulf or who knows where. This
Now,
is a
okay,
very common
that
technique.
brings up a bunch of questions for me. Um, and Nancy, hold on for a second. We have come to the middle of the program here. We will
Okay?
take a short break, and we will be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to Dallas Live, and our featured guest is Nancy Hartwell, who has spent all her life uncovering human trafficking. The number to call is 469-307-1642, and we will be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Dallas Live. I am your host, Dr. RC. The number to call is 469 307 1642. We are progressing to our second half of this program. You are listening to Nancy Hartwell, who has spent her life uncovering human trafficking. Nancy, welcome back to our third segment.
Thank you, Doctor.
All right, very good. Now, something you said before we took the break was that they will cart them off in cargo ships. Now, there is no
Yes.
control. I mean, how do they? I mean, you can't just go to Washington D.C. Or to Charleston, the shipyard, and how do you do this?
Well, or cargo jets or ships. They drug them, they put them in big crates, marked some kind of industrial equipment, and um, if the customs officer gets suspicious, a few dollars here or a few francs there, and the years to us all.
Now, does this happen out of what? Did they just put them on the FedEx and drop them off in Abu Dhabi? I mean, I mean,
Well, there are,
nobody's checking it.
this is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and it is extremely well organized. In the Mediterranean, it's mostly small boats that would carry like a dozen victims at a time. Um, it's but see, a tall, good-looking blonde can be sold for more than $100,000.
My goodness.
So if you have to invest $10 or $20,000 in bribes along the way, it's still a very lucrative business.
I can imagine, yes. Wow. So now you said that tall blonde women, they are paid a premium, and
Yes,
let us talk about this particular case. Before we talked, we talked very briefly about it, but our audience doesn't know anything about this particular case. Natalie Holloway, remember her?
yes.
Now, what is the
The
story
girl,
on this?
okay, she was a girl from Alabama who was in Aruba. By the way, Aruba is one of the principal centers for trafficking in the Western Hemisphere. They have three major industries there. Number one is drugs, number two is trafficking, and number three is tourism. Anyway, she was there on her high school graduation trip. Now, if you remember, she was a very, very pretty blue-eyed blonde, and she vanished. And the authorities had presumed that she was murdered, but they never found a body. And they were questioning this Dutch guy by the name of Vandersloot, who was the last person that she was seen with. And they finally had to drop all charges because there was nobody and there was no proof whatsoever that she had been murdered. But when everything calmed down, he started bragging to his buddies that he had sold her to an Arab who worked in the oil industry in Venezuela right next door. So this is a case that we can put a name and a face on.
Oh my goodness.
Very scary.
So now that the story makes sense because it is likely that they could
Yes,
not find the
and
body because she's already sold.
that's right. And I used to work with a very fine detective. He'd been decorated for his detective work, and he said that the best explanation for why something happened or what happened is the simplest. So, and that explains absolutely everything right there.
Absolutely. Are there any other similar cases you can remember? Somewhat known case like Natalie Holloway, that the girl disappeared. They never found the body. It is
It,
likely
it,
that she may have been sold on trafficking.
yes, it's very likely that she's in the harem of an Arab somewhere in Venezuela. Um, it's very rare to find a case as well known as that, but there are hundreds of girls who just disappear every year. Nobody ever knows what happens to them. Nobody ever hears from them again. The parents are in grief because they don't know whether she's dead or alive. Um, these girls, especially the ones who are on the Gulf, are completely cut off from the world. The first rule of a trafficker is isolate. and
Hmm.
then it's easier to
Control.
manipulate and control. Right.
Right.
Um, no cell phones, no computers. Um, how are they going to get the word out? I mean, it's very difficult. They don't know. These girls don't know that their beloved grandmother just died. They don't know that their brother just got a wonderful scholarship and is off to Yale. They don't know that their best friend was killed by a drunk driver. They're completely cut off.
I can imagine. Yes. Remember the case that went on? I don't know which state. Castro, who kidnapped three young girls and had a child with one of them and kept them for almost 10 years.
Yes,
You know,
yes,
that is a very mind-boggling, tragic case. And
and it's
unfortunately, he
right
killed
here.
himself in the prison. But that's the only good news came out of it.
Right, but this is right here under our noses. I mean,
Yes.
it goes on. It goes on in every state. It goes on, in small towns. The picturesque America. It happens everywhere. If you see a house that has aluminum foil or plastic, um, opaque plastic covering the windows,
Uh huh.
there may be captives inside. Or if you see a door with locks on the outside, that's to keep people in and not to keep people out.
Mm-hmm.
You should take notice. And if you see suspicious activity, start noting it down. And if you see very much, call the cops because it might be worth investigating.
You know,
It
I
happens
I
right
I heard
under
of
our noses.
I heard of asylum locks where it's locked both inside and outside. So when you see one of those asylum locks in a regular house, you have to be suspicious.
Uh huh.
Oh my
Right.
god. All right, now
Absolutely.
we talked about who might be the traffickers. Now you see something that strike my interest. You see a lot of advertisement right here in Dallas morning news and all the other various places. You see news where there are advertisement for models. I think these are highly suspect.
Uh huh. Yes. Um, um, Traffickers are not always strangers. Um,
For like that
Something
Castro guy, he was not stranger to any of those girls.
that's right. Um, Sometimes a jilted boyfriend
Uh
will want revenge,
huh.
and he will arrange to have a girl sold into slavery just to teach her a lesson.
Uh huh.
Sometimes a stepfather, they have a very bad reputation in this industry, especially if he has been abusing the kid and the kid is getting upset and is threatening to turn him in. Sometimes it's a father who is at his wits end because the girl is a discipline problem, or just he realizes that he can make an awful lot of money, and not all fathers are nice people.
I
Um,
didn't know that such fathers still exist here in America.
um, Not quite so much here in America, but very much in other places of the world,
Yeah, I know in the
especially
Southeast Asia, it's not uncommon, especially Southeast Asia and Middle East, it's not uncommon for the fathers to sell their prepubescent daughters to
right,
40-year-old
right,
old man. So that I have seen.
right, right. Um, and in many places, girls are simply considered commodities, and a father is delighted to have some daughters because they can bring him in some money. But um, I was shocked, absolutely shocked, to discover that, like the pedophile who gets a job at an elementary school.
Yeah.
There are some people, not lots, but some, who get jobs as school counselors, as clergy, as law enforcement officers, so that they can indulge in this trade.
And you also
Um,
noticed scout leaders,
I'm sorry.
scout, Boy Scout,
Oh yes, scout leaders. Yes,
you're right.
yes.
My
People
goodness,
who
there was a movie I was watching a few years back. The policeman was the bad guy. And imagine somebody get into his circle of influence. I mean, that will be absolutely incredible what they can do.
yes, because I think most of them start out honest, and then a couple of these cases cross their desks, and they realize that there's an awful lot of money that can be made, and so they succumb to temptation. Um, every couple of weeks, I hear another story about a policeman who's been arrested, or an FBI or somebody who has been arrested for trafficking.
All right.
um,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
it happens.
All right. So now, ladies and gentlemen, we are coming to the end of third segment. And next, we are going to in the last segment. We are going to talk about the three books, and these three books are available today and tomorrow at Amazon.com as a Kindle book. The first one is Harem Slaves. The second one
Yes,
is Prince Ibrahim's Favorite, and the last
yes,
one is Voices from the Harem.
that's correct.
All right, now
Now,
now we are going to take a short break, and we are going to talk about these three books and then conclude the session. It's been wonderful so
okay.
far listening to your ideas and stories, Nancy. Ladies and gentlemen, the number to call is 469-307-1642. I am your host, Dr. RC. You are listening to Dallas Live, and we will be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Dallas Live. I am your host, Dr. RC, and you are listening to Nancy Hartwell, who has spent her life uncovering human trafficking. She has written three books. Nancy, welcome back to our program. Tell our audience about these three books and how they can get these books.
Okay, they are available for download free on Amazon.com today and tomorrow. They form the first three books in my human trafficking series, and if you search for human trafficking series, they will come up. They all look similar. The covers all look similar. The first book tells the story of an 18-year-old girl from Bethesda, Maryland, who is kidnapped while she's visiting some friends in France, and she ends up in the harem of an 81-year-old sheikh.
My goodness.
No, they do not fall in love and live happily ever after. No, it is not wall to wall passion. She is scared to death. She's absolutely miserable. Um, she's cut off from her friends and family. And so that's just the beginning of this saga. It has a happy ending. She is rescued by a man who um, falls in love with her. But to be honest, it's not a particularly realistic ending. But I fell in love with the heroine, and I don't want her to suffer what most of these girls actually suffer. But it it is a very eye-opening and revealing account of um, of what a girl goes through once she is trafficked through the Gulf. I have collected hundreds of stories over the years, and this book is based on these true accounts. The characters are fictional, but the events and the circumstances are not. Then there is Prince Ibrahim's Favorite. This is
This
the
is the second
sequel.
book.
That's the second book, yes.
Okay.
It is the sequel to Harem Slave, and it continues the story of how she tries to readjust to normal life, which is very difficult. Um, and then, since she was rescued, her former owner is furious that she was stolen from him, and he decides he wants her back. And the tension grows. It's a very good read. And then
Oh.
the third book, Voices from the Harem, is not a conventional novel at all. Um, these are simply the stories of each girl in a large royal harem, and each girl tells her story of how she was abducted, enslaved, and ended up there, and what she thinks about it, and how she manages to hang on to her sanity, although, frankly, many of them do not.
Yeah, I can imagine. Now, you are talking about 111 women in Prince Ibrahim's slave harem. Now,
Yes.
I mean, I know I have seen Hollywood movies of these harems, and they look much nicer. Are they? I don't think they look that nicer in real life, I would imagine.
Well, there's of course a huge variation. Some of them are very nice harems indeed. In some of them, each girl has her own room. The food is good. There's decent medical care. But the world stops and starts at the harem walls. There might even be a TV, but it's usually just on one Islamic religious channel that most of these girls don't find particularly enchanting. Um, a few of them even have computer games that the girls can play to pass the time. In some of them, the conditions are horrible. The girls sleep on the concrete floor, um, with no sheet, no pillow, no nothing. They're just stuffed into a storeroom.
Wow.
Some harems, some harems have hundreds of girls, hundreds. Many of the girls never even meet the man who owns them.
So
It's like
the harem is not the same as a brothel. Is that correct?
no, no. A harem is belongs to a man,
Okay.
just one man, right,
Okay.
for his own pleasure and for the pleasure of his guests.
Okay.
But a brothel, and a lot of these girls go to brothels, and some of them are so brutal that life expectancy is calculated in weeks. Um, by
Oh
the
my.
time the girls are 25,
They're gone.
that's considered old.
Uh-huh.
So they would be sold then into a private harem or into a another club lower on the food chain. Um, some of them, from what I hear, are sold into a blonde baby manufacturing facility where the girls are inseminated with Viking stock and pumped full of um, fertility drugs to encourage multiple births and have baby after baby after baby until their systems give out.
My goodness. Now, what do they do? These babies are born slaves?
Yes, and they're raised for pedophilia and for brothel. Yes,
Oh, wait a minute. I mean, this sounds absolutely horrible. I mean, these things actually exist. This is the first time I'm hearing this. Apparently, I am one of
I
those,
have heard
you know,
I have I have I have heard numerous rumors of such a facility. Numerous. In fact, I think there are probably several.
so coming back to your third book, it's a companion volume for book two. All 111
Uh huh.
women in Prince Ibrahim's slave harem tell their
Uh huh.
individual stories. Apparently, according to your book, the Prince Ibrahim kept them much better condition than what you found in a Mumbai, India brothel.
These are his harem is actually a very nice harem.
You sound like
They
everybody should go there and take a look at it as a tourist spot. Huh? I hope not.
well, in fact, I have a friend who recently came back from the Middle East, and
Okay.
I mentioned that I was writing this book, and he said, "Oh, I visited a friend of mine, and he showed me his slave harem. There were 38 girls there, but all of his friends were making fun of him because they were cheapos. They were girls from Egypt and Turkey and Greece, And so he decided that to keep up with the Joneses, he had to upgrade his livestock to the Scandinavian types.
Okay, so there is also a hierarchy of the sheikh having a different type of harem depending upon what the stock he is holding. It's unbelievable.
Uh, right, right. But these girls are considered specialty livestock, and they are totally expendable. Um, they're given as door prizes for lavish parties. They're well, in Prince Ibrahim's harem, the girl with the lowest performance evaluation each month is executed.
What do you mean? They
Um,
just kill them? I mean, murder them?
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's to enhance their motivation.
Wow. Wow, this is
Yeah,
absolutely horrifying, and I mean, what is this? I mean, heartbreaking, sad, tragic stories you are coming one after another.
yes, and they these stories absolutely break my heart, and they turn my stomach, and people just don't know about them, and so that's why I wrote these books to share this horror with everybody else. And I'm very pleased to say that all three of these books became best almost immediate bestsellers
Uh huh.
in their category on Amazon. Harem Slave is usually number one, and the other two that were just released a month ago, they're usually number like 8 and 10. But it's still very gratifying to see all three of them in the top 10 bestseller list in that category. In fact, Harem Slave at one point reached number 7 in all fiction on Amazon.
All right, audience, ladies and gentlemen, the website is nancyhartwell.com, one word. That is Hart, Hartwell, Nancy. nancyhartwell.com, one word. And you can find the books at her website, through her website on amazon.com or a Kindle book. The three books are Harem Slaves, Prince Ibrahim's Favorite, and Voices from the Harem. Very good read, very good books, and I think you should read them carefully and let your children, especially parents, you have to watch out. This is a very difficult scenario here, and I'm surprised that the government is not doing it. One other factor that I noticed is when there is a religious support for this type of activity and also for slavery, and American Psychiatric Association coming up with all kinds of special dispensation for people having different kind of wiring, and like what you talked
Uh-huh.
about, Nancy. I mean, this is political correctness is not going to work out at all in this case. And Nancy, what are your
Yeah.
final thoughts, and what do you want to tell our audience, and what they should do, and how they protect themselves and their children?
Well, just please spread the word. Explain to your kids. Now, your own kids, of course, are going to be smart enough that they're not going to fall for these tactics. But every kid has some naive friend. So you have to tell your kids so that they can explain these techniques to their friends, okay? They're very common techniques, especially if somebody is stressing secrecy, huge red flag. If you see something suspicious going on, please think about calling the police and get it investigated. Maybe there's nothing happening, but maybe there is, and you may stop somebody from going through hell.
Absolutely, yes. Keep your ears and eyes open, and also make sure that when your child is using, especially the teenagers, using the internet and going to the social media, be careful what you are saying, watching. I wouldn't mind. Personally, I wouldn't mind spying on them.
Right. Well, you're trying to protect them,
Yes,
and you need to stress that you're doing this out of love and not because you're trying to police them or destroy their social lives.
right.
And one other quick note: many people, when they get these books, they're expecting pornography, and please, that is not the case. There is quote adult material because you can't talk about the life of a sex slave without saying certain things out loud.
Yes.
But they are not pornography, and if you're expecting that, you're going to be very very disappointed.
Absolutely, yes, it is not, and it is it's pretty much a heartbreaking scenario. I can imagine. I have known people, and personally, I had some experience losing loved ones. Albeit temporarily, but it is heartbreaking to see what you can do. So yeah, please monitor your kids, especially on the social media, because that has become the number one cause for the number one way to for the pedophiles and traffickers to lure your child. Is that correct?
That's correct. The internet, the social media sites, and these ads on the websites that young people like to look at. So be very careful about those, and please help somebody who's planning to run away find some other solution. Those are the best ways that you can help. You can even volunteer. A lot of church groups and civic organizations have outreach programs to help girls who have been trafficked reintegrate into normal life. It's extremely difficult because most of them were severely abused at home. They ran away, then they were even more severely abused by a pimp. They don't know what a normal life is like. And I have a friend who runs a shelter, and he says that some of them are so find that an environment where somebody takes care of them, they're comfortable, they're safe, they get hugs, good food, support, education. They don't know how to respond. This is just so weird that they leave. That's how messed up these girls are. So please, they can all use a hand of friendly help, and these organizations that fight these crimes, like the um, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, they always appreciate some financial donations as well.
Excellent, very good. Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to Nancy Hartwell at nancyhartwell.com is her website. She has written three books. All three are available today and tomorrow at no charge from Amazon.com as a Kindle book. The first one is The Harem Slaves, the second one is The Prince Ibrahim's Favorite, and the last one is Voices from the Harem. Nancy, thank you so much for joining us, and it's been a pleasure talking to you, and it's been eye opening for me at least. What kind of atrocities are being committed in this world even as of now, and the seems to be the slave trade is alive and well in 21st century. It's
I'm afraid
heartbreaking.
it is. It absolutely is, and I thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to help share about this tragedy.
All right, Nancy, stay on the line. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now coming to the conclusion of this program, and the number to call is 469 307 1642, and we will be right back.